Cobb County, the VIPs, the people that are here for the very first time. Would you please stand? Everybody that's here for the very first time this morning at a conference, please stand up. We're just really pleased to have everybody here. If any of you that are here, especially the youth folks, if you're not receiving my emails from Cobb GOP, then please let us have your email address before you leave today. Or you go online to where? What's our website?
CobbGOP.org.
CobbGOP.org. CobbGOP.org.
Ask everyone's forbearance this morning when they come to the applause lines, make sure your elbows are not on the table, because it makes everything jump.
We're just really pleased to have you back home in Cobb County. She is a Cobb County, for those who don't know that. Pardon, George? Okay, we have some elected officials in the room today. Derrick Morgan, where are you, Derrick? We have Scott Sweeney. Scott, where is that? We also have Vic Reynolds, our PA. Vic. And we have Representative Ed Lindsay. Ed. Also from our state party, we have Scott Johnson, who's one of us anyway. He is the chairman of the 11th district. The GM of Georgia GOP. We have our second vice chair for the Georgia GOP, Ron Johnson. Where are you, Ron? There.
Hey, John.
Sir?
You go to plant.
Is Donnie Fritz here? Donnie?
Oh, I post an entire. There's no cutting. I put the entire thing up on YouTube to get it to end.
Did what?
I put them
Donnie is
uncut.
the president of the KSU, Kennesaw State University College.
If there's any question about all this.
And somebody else special here. Do y'all remember back in May, we lost one of our own, and this family is with us today, the wife and children. And this group has certainly taken point. Becky Ellen, let's give her a round of applause. We got Ben, 12 years old. We got Isaac, 11 years old. Aaron's 9, and Abby, 6. Right? Okay. This is the family that this organization has stepped up to the plate to help in a mighty way. And Becky asked me if she could come this morning and say a few words. So, you want to? Okay.
I apologize if I have to read it. This is not easy for me. My husband served on the Cobb Republican Party for many, many years. It was a huge passion of his, and I didn't get to participate in any of those things with him because I was raising his babies. But I'm grateful for the opportunity to come and see you all face to face, because he would come home and tell me stories about all of you, and I know how much he appreciated serving alongside you, and I can see why. I had the opportunity to spend some time with Joe and Billy and Don Crook and some other people that come to my house to meet me, and I appreciated being able to see all of your faces. My husband was very devoted to the Cobb Republican Party, and he was enthusiastic about serving with you. I was overwhelmed with gratitude. He told me not to cry.
Good luck with
He's
that.
called. By your generous hearts towards us and my family, I God used you to meet some very unexpected needs in my life. When I felt the most vulnerable and a very unexpected, uncertain time in my life. But beyond meeting our needs, it gave me hope in this time of my life. And I know that when anyone gives, it's given back to you 100-fold with bonus. And I just pray that every one of you who God used to meet that need in my life, that God will bless you back for your generous gift to us.
Thank you for giving us an opportunity to do that. And I met this family for the first time, really, I was in New Testament, but right after some time of death, I met them, and it's just turned into a family of love here. And
one more thing. It's a very exceptional man that will come and play with my children and my guinea pigs.
I was figuring it's one of those pot-bellied things. But also understand that our General Counsel for Georgia GOP, Ann Lewis, is in the audience. Ann, get ahead. Okay. You know, we started last month with a format that everybody here seemed to really like, and the candidates liked it. Last month we had two of the Senatorial candidates, Phil Gamble and Jack Kingston here. Each one had 30 minutes to tell who they are and what they stand for, and have Q&A. And it's a very productive time. We're looking forward to today's format again. We have two more of the Senatorial candidates. We have Karen Handel and Derrick Grayson with us today. And the first up is going to be Karen Handel and then Derrick. And I'm going to ask, who do you have, Grayson? Jim Phillips, one of our very own, will be introducing Karen. Before we do that, a couple more things of housekeeping here. Volunteers. We have two things coming up that we always work forward to get ready for, and that's the North Georgia State Fair. That's from September the 19th to the 29th. We always have a large booth there, good presence, and talk to a lot of folks at that booth. And this year we're doing it a little bit differently. We have had it where candidates had the booth for a night or a day. We're doing that again this time, but we actually have two booths. They're side by side. It looks like one booth. The candidate will have half. The GOP will man our half every night. Because we got to thinking about the fact, I got a couple complaints last year about us endorsing someone. I got to thinking about the fact that most people only go to the fair one time. So when they go by the booth, they see ex-candidate there promoting himself or herself, and they think, well, the GOP's endorsing that person. So this time we're going to do a little bit differently. We still want all the candidates there each night. I think we may already have them all filled up. But anyway, go to the volunteer spot at cobbgop.org and volunteer for a couple of hours. We're doing it in what, 2 hour shifts or 3 hours? 2 hours.
2 hours.
2 hour shifts every day and every night. So we need a lot of folks doing that. So if you want to, just go to cobbgop.org. Click on the right button there, the volunteer spot, fill in your name when you want to come, and then we'll expect to see you there. We have the same thing happening on September the 21st, which is right in the middle of the fair time. We have another place that we always like to be in, that's the East Cobb Parade and Festival. This year we actually going to have a float parade. Last year we had a vintage car, that went over really well. This year we have a beautifully decorated float. It has been on reserve since the 4th of July when we bring this out. Our float committee built it, so we're going to get to use it this time in the East Cobb Parade and have a huge presence in that. We need people walking in that parade, and we also need people working the booth. But we really want to have as many people as possible walking in the parade with us. Again, go to cobbgop.org, look for the volunteer spot for that, and sign up for it. Outside of that, one more thing, cleanup committee. When we're through here today, those of you who can stay and help clean up, raise your hand, please. Very good. Expect to see each one out there. After, report to Rose or Billy, and they'll tell you what to do. Okay, Karen. All right, Jim, come on up.
Good morning, I'm Tim Phillips, and I have the privilege of introducing Karen Handel. I met Karen back in the 2010 governor's race, which was my first involvement in any political organization or campaign following my retirement. After getting to know her, I knew she was a person of strong values, problem solver with a fresh perspective, and a strong candidate that I could support. Hearing about her life, her background, her experiences, I'm reminded of a quote that says, "It's not the cards you are dealt, it's how you play them." Karen's career expands both the business and political world, working with several major companies, holding key political positions in Georgia. She was the first Republican and the second woman elected as Secretary of State. Recently, we've been following Karen. Her campaign launched only in Washington, highlighting 42 ridiculous things that could happen only in Washington. And it's quite interesting if you would take the time to look at the things that she has posted. The number represents 42 years that the congressmen in the race have in Washington. So you have to ask yourself, after 42 years in a job, how can you justify promoting someone to a new position when the Rasmussen survey recently showed 62% rate the legislator's performance as poor? In the business world, which I came from, we promoted people within, and we found people that earned the position and knew what they were doing. If not, we would go outside and find the right person. So today I want to introduce you to Karen Handel, who is the right person for this. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for taking the time to be here, and I really appreciate the chance, Joe. Thank you so very much. And I know a lot of people, you could have been many different places on a Saturday morning, so I appreciate that this is where you chose to be. And Ron, thanks for driving over from, you came a long way, I appreciate it. I think most of you know a bit, most of you know most about my background, so I'm just going to go right into the issues given the format that we have so we can have a really good exchange. And let's start first and foremost with Syria. Folks, if I were your United States Senator, it would be no. We do not have a clear mission set forth. There is lack of clarity from the President, and at a minimum, he owes that to the American people to set forth a clear strategic vision that has clarity in objectives and end goals. And thus far, we have not received that. Secondly, Obamacare. We need to defund it, repeal it, replace it. The bottom line is stop it right now. It is necessary. Now, one thing that I think gets lost in the debate and the discussion is what we as conservatives would like to see in health care reform. And let's be clear, as conservatives, we want affordable access to health care. But we want it done in a way that you as a patient are driving those solutions in your health care between you and your physician. Because if the federal government is going to tell us what health care is, then that also means they're telling us what our health care will not be. And that is unacceptable. Now, it strikes me as a little ironic that this bill is called the Affordable Care Act, when, frankly, it is anything but affordable for the nation and, frankly, for individuals and families. Think about it. So, we're going to raise, the proposal is to raise Medicare under supposed savings that they're going to get from fraud in order to pay for Obamacare. Well, that seems to be a little bit of a shaky funding proposition to me. Then the reports that just came out this week about how much it would actually cost in premiums are anything but affordable. And once again, the mainstream media is trying to spin it that it's affordable. But I would ask you this. If you're 25 years old and you're making $25,000 a year, you're really making paycheck to paycheck decisions, aren't you? For those of you who are younger in the room, Donnie, somewhere over there. And to be able to find an extra $75, I think the actual figure is $68, but nearly $75 a month to pay a mandated cost is going to be really tough to do. Imagine a 40-year-old who is making $29,000 a year being required to find nearly $100 a month or have the IRS bear down on him or her. At $29,000 a year salary, finding $100 additional a month is a huge burden and a gigantic lift. These folks in Washington have fundamentally lost touch with what it is like to live in the real world. How many of you remember what it was like to be struggling month to month to month to make sure that you could pay your rent, pay your mortgage, pay your car? Every single one of us remember that. But these folks in Washington have forgotten what it is like to be in the real world and to have to make ends meet for families day after day after day. And probably the most disturbing part of Obamacare is the HHS mandate, which will require individuals to betray their religious beliefs and defy their conscience over the coverage of abortion and abortion-related drugs. That is a gross infringement on our freedoms and our liberties, and it cannot be forgotten in this debate. Last week I was at a forum on healthcare reform, and a priest did a lecture about it, and one of the things that he said really struck a chord with me. He said that religious freedom is not a product of liberty. It is a prerequisite of liberty. Think about that. Religious freedom is not a product of liberty. It is a prerequisite of liberty. Ladies and gentlemen, that is what is at stake in this fight, and we must demand that our elected leaders in Washington stand firm for what we know is flawed policy. Both sides know that it's flawed policy, and we have to step up and demand and hold people accountable in Washington so that we can make sure that this does not go forward, if for no other reason than this conscious trampling HHS mandate. Now, there's been a lot of the news about whether or not Congress is or isn't exempt from Obamacare. So let's clear that up right now. Congress is not exempt from Obamacare. Like the rest of us, they either will have insurance through their employer, or they must get insurance through an Obamacare exchange or a plan created under Obamacare. There was legislation passed that said that they will go into the exchange or purchase a plan created under Obamacare. That is a fact that they will be subject to that. What is also a fact is the following: that while the rest of Americans who are forced into the exchanges are forced to buy a plan, will have advantage of a tax incentive if they meet certain thresholds. They will not, however, have the advantage of a subsidy up to $11,000 a year that the members of Congress will in fact keep. It is wrong, it is unacceptable, and I promise you, as your next United States Senator, it will be what is good for you will be good for me. We had some news out about jobs and the economy yesterday, and it is abundantly clear that the economic growth in our country is anemic at best. Job growth is stagnant, and even what we thought was good news from the past couple of months, those job creation numbers have all been lowered by tens of thousands of jobs. We are seeing now the lowest workforce participation since 1978. Lowest workforce participation since 1978. Now, what is it that we're going to do about it? We need to get our fiscal house in order to get the economy going again. That means that we have to have a real meaningful plan to draw down the debt. We need to cut spending, and it can be done if we have discipline and we set priorities. I believe we need to move to a 2-year budget cycle and go to zero-based budgeting. It is no one in the business world gets to start their budget with exactly how much they spent the year before, and that's the number they key off of in the first year. And it is doable. We have every agency, we put them on a cycle and we say, we're going to do these 5 agencies and we're going to go through them with a fine-tooth comb. We're going to check their mission. How much have they expanded beyond what they were originally intended to do? How many programs are being funded that were always intended to be short-term projects but have been funded now for decades on end? Review the regulatory climate so that we can pull regs off the books that no longer make sense. And we do that, and if we can get through each agency at least every 10 years, imagine the amount of spending that we can draw down. And there are short-term spending or immediate spending things, low-hanging fruit that we can get right now today. Think about this. The federal government every year spends nearly $200 billion making improper contract payments. How many of you in the business world could survive if you just paid invoices randomly that you had no business paying year after year after year? $200 billion a year. So there is a lot that we can do to get immediate drawdowns on the spending. The next thing we have to do, I'm a little tired of talking about tax reform, so I think it's time to scrap the IRS, repeal the 16th Amendment, and get moving on the fair tax. And then we are going to have to start demanding answers and demanding that our elected leaders in Washington step up and tell us what is going on at the NSA. Why are they spying on Americans? They are doing nothing about it. Benghazi, we still do not know what happened. And those are American lives that were lost over there. We must demand answers for it. And while we're at it, what is going on in the Veterans Administration and the way that we are treating the men and women who put their lives on the line for us is a disgrace. It is a disgrace, and we as Americans can do better. These men and women deserve for us to do better. And as your United States Senator, I will be a champion in that area so that we fundamentally overhaul the way we're doing health care for our veterans, the very men and women who allow us to have helped us ensure that we had the freedom and the liberty to have this breakfast right here this morning to be able to have this debate. Now, there are a lot of really good people running for United States Senate. The congressmen all have very good records of service for their districts, without question. Together, they have over 40 years in Washington. That's a lot of Washington. I believe we need a little less Washington in Washington. And we need to bring new perspective and fresh ideas to the United States Senate. An individual like myself who will come forward and have renewed vigor around problem solving. We've got to break the logjam. And those of us who come from the business world, we know that sometimes to break stagnation, you really have to change the players. It's not enough to just move individuals from one side of the Capitol to the other. We need to break the stagnation and have individuals who bring common sense, who can look at a piece of policy and understand that it's not just words on a piece of paper, folks. We have to understand the consequences and the impact of policy in the short term, the midterm, and the long term. That's what good leaders and good problem solvers really do. And we also must demand results. Look at the results we're getting out of Washington. Is anyone happy with it?
No.
Exactly. We have a $16 trillion debt, reckless, out-of-control spending. We've got Obamacare bearing down on us. It's going to crush jobs. We know that jobs are not being created, and the few jobs that are being created are part-time or short-term. We've got the IRS scandal, the NSA scandal, Benghazi, and Congress takes a 5-week vacation. We deserve results. And an individual like myself who is results-oriented throughout my entire career, even in the face of great odds, I was able to deliver results. When I came in as a CEO of the North Fulton Chamber, we were on the brink of bankruptcy. I could have told that board of directors, I tried, but then the doors of that chamber would have closed. But I didn't just try, I did. And that chamber is open today and doing all the things that good chambers around this state and this country do, creating jobs, working to create jobs, economic development. When I came in as chairman of the Fulton County Board of Commissioners, 4 Democrats controlled the commission. I didn't have the votes to do a single solitary thing. There was a budget on the table with a 3 mil property tax increase to fill a $100 million budget deficit. I could have come back to the voters of Fulton County and said, I tried, I voted no, but what would the result have been? A property tax increase for the people that I represented. I wasn't willing to accept that as a result. I went to work, I found the way, I had the will to do what needed to be done to balance that budget without a tax increase. That's the kind of leadership that I'm going to bring to the United States Senate. Now, we've talked a lot about the challenges that we're facing, but I want you to know that I stand here with great optimism for America, extraordinary optimism for our country. And here's why. Because we have always been a nation that rises to whatever challenge we face. And we will do that again in this instance. We will do it through shared sacrifice. We will do it because individuals like you are going to be willing to stand up and hold elected officials accountable. You are going to elect the right best people to represent you in Washington, not special interests, not the establishment, but you. We cannot let our frustrations hold us on the sidelines. We have to channel those frustrations into action. I will not let my frustrations keep me on the sidelines and create an America of mediocrity. And I ask you to think about that as well. We're going to do what we have to because that's what Americans do. I was at a speech earlier this week and they played a tribute to Ronald Reagan. And it reminded me that he was the first president that I was able to vote for. And for a young girl who had left home at 17, and I finished school and went out and got a job and worked really hard. And Ronald Reagan touched me for the following reason. He told a country that at the time was really struggling with a lot of challenges. He told our nation that our best days were ahead. And if America's best days were ahead, it meant that this young girl's best days would be ahead as well. And what I know is that only in America could I be standing before you today to ask for your vote as your next United States Senator. That's what is at stake and why I'm running. So that next 17-year-old boy or girl who might be facing a tough situation at home and might have to be out on his or her own, that he or she will also have the great opportunities to succeed and prosper that I have had. So I ask for your vote, but I am going to work very hard to earn it so that together we will rise to the occasion and do the things that we must to ensure that America remains the greatest land of opportunity and the greatest land of the free. Thank you all.
We've obviously seen a massive increase in the power of the presidency. It's been taken to bounds that are far beyond what Nixon did, and we've been listening to cries about for decades now. One of the most significant changes I've seen in the way the government's been changed from the time of founding has been the administrative state, that is the ceding of power from the legislature to the executive, and the such thing as administrative courts and administrative law. In recent years, a couple actually had to go to the Supreme Court to find out that under the Clean Water Act, the EPA could not restrict their complaints simply to the EPA, but they had a right to be heard by a judge. This indicates to me that the administrative state is gone bonkers. Would you support moves by the legislature to curtail the authority given to the executive bureaucracies so that regulations past certain points in penalties to citizens cannot be administered by any regulator and have to be written in law by people in Congress that we get to elect? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, there's a lot in that. Yeah, I would certainly take a look at that. I think there's no question that in Washington, the White House, particularly under Obama, has gone far beyond what would be his normal authority using executive orders. It's interesting, a couple of years ago, I did a speech at Eric Erickson's Red State, and my speech was a comparison between the overreach of the White House under Nixon with Obama. And I think arguably we are seeing a far greater overreach with this president than we did with Nixon. We saw the results there. So absolutely, I think that is something to consider. consider, because we want to make sure that it's always a fine balance between making sure that we have good oversight from the regulatory standpoint, but also not infringing and going overboard. Yes, sir.
What's your position on term limits for senators and congressmen?
The question is, what's my position on term limits for congressmen and senators? I support it. I think that, if I can't get the job in 12 years, if I'm not going to get the job done in 12 years, I need to go home anyway.
One of the problems we've had is the party being able to clearly state our reasons for taking a position on any issue.
I'll repeat the question too, folks.
So, what I would like to know, particularly on the area of Syria, is what's your top 3 reasons why we should not be in Syria?
The question is first about how the party and Republicans, conservatives articulate our positions, and then secondly, why should we not go into Syria? So I'll take Syria first, and then I want to talk a little bit about messaging and articulating that. So on Syria, first, the president has not laid out a clear mission and end goals and what the specific objectives would be. I'm not sure that, quote, making a statement or saving face, rather, rises to the occasion of vital national interest. And when we look at military action around the world, vital national security is what should be our overriding objective. Secondly, I think a pretty strong case can be made on the other side of the issue that engaging could well escalate what is already a very tenuous situation over there. Now, on articulating messages, I think that that's fair. I think even on defunding of Obamacare in particular, we've sort of lost a little bit of control of the message. We need to talk more about the fact that we as Republicans, we do support portability of health insurance. We do support trying to address the issue of pre-existing conditions. We just differ with how the liberals want to do it. We would like to see the market drive it through market proposals and make sure that the patient always remains a priority in it. And Congressman Tom Price, I want to say it's H.R. 2300, has really a solid piece of legislation that I would encourage all of you to take a look at, and we need to talk about it more. And then, of course, there's always the fallback, and I think it's an excuse that, the mainstream media, they don't want to let us talk about it. Well, folks, we have a lot of other opportunities to get our message out besides just the mainstream media. And we can't give up on going on the mainstream media. I say take it to them. Take it to them and get out there. And on this whole notion of shutting down the federal government, it frustrates me immensely that Republicans somehow have taken ownership of it. It is not Congress's decision around whether or not the federal government is going to shut down or not over Obamacare. Senator Lee, whose proposal I support very, very strongly, says let's have 2 votes. A continuing resolution budget that does not fund Obamacare and a separate one on Obamacare funding so that everyone puts their name on the dotted line of whether they support the funding or they don't. And then it becomes the president's decision on whether or not he wants to shut down the federal government. And it is his decision to make around whether or not he is going to put his, quote, signature legacy policy ahead of the operation of the federal government and the best interests of the American people. That is his decision. Congress will give him an option. He then is the ultimate decider on it. So we need to reject this approach that is on us.
I want to talk about Georgia more sort of the national picture. And I'll talk to Tricia about jobs, but for education, in the state of Georgia, which is over 50% of our state budget, we all know that we get to spend a lot of money, but we don't get a lot of results. What can you do from the office of the U.S. Senate to help us with our education situation in Georgia, particularly with the differences, if you can explain the differences between Common Core, No Child Left Behind, and the values that you have in education?
Well, I think the first thing that we can do is get the federal government out of the way of educating our children here in Georgia. again, for all of us who oppose Common Core, what strikes me is that we've never said that we don't support standards. We support standards. Everyone in Georgia wants to have the highest education standards we possibly can. Why? Because we care about our children. We care about our young people graduating from high school, ready and prepared to do whatever it is that life is going to bring to them to do next. For some children, it's going to be being able to move on to a four-year college. For others, it's going to be going right into the workforce. There's a lot of young people who were just like me when I was graduating from high school, that they just weren't going to have the opportunity to go straight into a four-year college. That's why we must make sure that that K through 12 education, it is worthwhile and it actually prepares our young people. I would love to see us be in a place as we roll back government spending at the federal level. Those are dollars that then can remain here in Georgia instead of going up to Washington, and then it becomes our legislature's job to really make sure that education is a priority. I would very much like to see a much more robust connection between especially our high schools and manufacturing, and the growing manufacturing sector in Georgia with the Kia and many others that are coming in, and the technical side of it. These are young people that in their senior years, they're ready, they're technically savvy enough to be able to start in a program that could train them and work closely with these companies to get them ready to come into the workforce. Well, I really appreciate it. I'm going to end with this. I need one more.
One more. Thank you,
Sure.
Sarah, for coming down this morning.
Absolutely.
I'd like to ask you.
Oh, he's got a whole piece of paper for this question, y'all. Get ready. I'm kidding.
I'm not too swift. But I'd like to address two things that you mentioned, actually three now, that you mentioned this morning, which I must commend you on. Your Syria position, your Affordable Care Act position, and the education position, which I think we can all agree we need to get the federal government looking at it. What was missing, though, and perhaps I misunderstood, or the implication was there where it didn't belong. We often agree that the president hasn't presented a vital national security interest there. He hasn't made the case as you described. And with Obamacare, we really do need to repeal that whole entire act. What's missing, though, and again, perhaps forgive me for not hearing it, I didn't hear you mention the Constitution. I'd like to know where in the Constitution is the justification for any of these things, and isn't it true that we need a declaration of war from Congress? Isn't it true that Article 1, Section 8 does not provide for Obamacare in any way, shape, or form? As well?
I agree with that. The U.S. Supreme Court felt differently. I mean, my approach on things is two things. I look at things through, first and foremost, the Constitution. I mean, isn't that supposed to be what drives all the decisions at the federal level? And as we go through looking at these agencies, when I talked about whether or not they had expanded beyond what the intent is, that was reference direct to the Constitution, the intent of the Constitution. And secondly, I look at it through a business filter of how we can actually do things as well, and then personal convictions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have one more thing. What committees, when you're elected senator, would you be interested in getting in the Senate?
Okay. The first two would have to be involving, obviously, agribusiness, because I think that because our state is so dependent on agriculture and agribusiness, while that's not my background, obviously, I'm being elected to represent Georgia, and I have a responsibility to be engaged in the issues that are most important for our state. Secondly, armed services. Third, anything involving budget. Heard me talk a lot about budget and spending, etc., and that is an area where I have an extraordinary strength that I bring to the table. Thank you all very, very much. I appreciate it.
I want to also welcome somebody that I overlooked a while ago. I saw when he came in, but just wasn't on the list. Brad Wheeler from the school board. Brad, where are you? Are there any other elected officials in the House this morning that I did not recognize? Anybody? Raise your hand, please. Okay. Our next speaker, Derrick Grayson. Come on up. Also candidate for U.S. Senate.
Hope everybody's doing okay this morning. My name is Derrick Grayson. I'm running for the U.S. Senate. They asked me if I had anybody that would like to come up and read my bio and do an introduction for me, and I said no. Essentially, I look like you. I'm an American citizen just like you who has been victimized by a government that is out of control. So that's really all that we need to know, because we all have that in common. And the other part of that is this government, the president, has help from both sides of the aisle. And that's primarily what I'm going to be talking about. 3 things I'm going to do before I get into that. Let me go ahead and dispense with this. I don't much like labels. So you'd be doing me a favor if you do not refer to me as an African American. I am a black man. And yes, I will say this. I'll wear this label. I am angry. In fact, I'm mad as hell. I'm an angry black man. I want to give a shout out to Cindy Yeager for tweeting, letting folk know that she was out here trying to see to it that we get this country going in the right direction. And I appreciate that, Cindy. Thank you. Okay, let's get into this. I don't do stomp speeches, and I'll tell you why. There are certain things we should expect from our representatives, so there's no point in me talking to you about things that I know you already want. On my website, if you grab one of these, everything that I stand for in the platform are things that I know most of you will agree with. It's there. You can read it. You can go to the website. You can check it out. Therefore, I will not waste your time doing a stomp speech to solicit or elicit applauses, because these are things I know you want anyway. But let me talk about what the real problems are. I'm going to say this about Obamacare. We had an opportunity to stop Obamacare. We didn't. Now, everybody's spending a lot of time talking about what they're going to do to defund Obamacare. But you know what? Too little, too late. You should have done what you said you were going to do in the first place. And that's how I feel about that. And if I were there, anything that came across that said, we're going to force the American people into this but exclude ourselves, I would say, oh, no, no. We're here for we the people. If it's not good enough for me, why am I going to force it on we the people? It should have died right then. As a representative of the people, I should have stood up on the highest mountain and said, American people, they want to pass legislation that excludes them, but they want to force you into it. It should have died with that alone. We didn't need anything else. I want to talk about what our government, some of the things that we do. Let me get right to it with Syria. We have no business bombing Syria. They have said we're doing it for humanitarian reasons because they use chemical weapons. I know of no other country that has used more chemical weapons on its citizens than the United States. The Tuskegee Airmen, Waco, even with the folk that were in the, I forget which organization it was, but they were protesting, they used tear gas on them. We had people over in the Congo where they were cutting off the breasts of women so that they couldn't breastfeed their children, cutting off the hands of men so that they could not take care of themselves. Yet we did nothing to help those people because it wasn't beneficial. There is benefit to war. And this is what Syria is all about. Just like Afghanistan, just like Iraq. But I won't get into the details of those. Let me just tell you the background that disturbs me about Syria. This information was leaked. Another Snowden leaked some information, and the American people found out that we were about to bomb Syria. The president had no choice but to respond. But if you listen to him in his press conference, he said, I have made a decision When did you get that power? And then he said, I've made a second decision. The leadership, and I hate that term, the leadership has said that they want me to consider what the American people have to say. When did it get like that? You represent us. Why aren't you conferring with us in the first place? That's what the Constitution says. It is we the people, not I the president, or we the representatives. It is we the people. You come to us first. And what put them on the spot? Britain, their parliament went to their people and asked them, and they resoundingly said no. And so they were out of it. But our government would like to dictate to us what they're going to do. I don't need representatives who feel that they have to lobby the president to hear the voices of we the people. That is not what our Constitution intended. None of us. If you can't take our concerns into consideration first, you need to go home.